I want to introduce the panel before we get into the panel. To my left is Mr. Feroz Abbas Khan, who's an acclaimed film director, screenwriter, and playwright. He's a winner of several national and international awards. He obtained critical acclaim for his film Gandhi My Father, Mahatma versus Gandhi, and Mughal Azam, the musical play. His theatrical work has traveled extensively across India and globally, playing to huge audiences and critical acclaim. He is internationally celebrated for his work in the field of entertainment education, for social behavior change, and women empowerment. We have Mr. Darren Tang, of course, who is the DG of WIPO. Prior to this, Mr. Tang was the Chief Executive of the Intellectual Property Office of Singapore. Mr. Tang drives WIPO right now, that engages with member nations and states. And WIPO also looks at and looks after the various treaties. We have Steve Krohn. Interestingly, Steve ran as president Village Roadshow, and he produced one of my favorite films that I told him, Mystic River. But apart from that, he produced an impressive library of 50 titles with huge production budgets, including the Matrix trilogy, Ocean's 11, Ocean's, what a lineup. Analyze This, Three Kings, Training Day, Mystic River, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Happy Feet, which I have to confess also my favorite film. Steve is not only and has not only been in the thick of things in terms of the film business, but he has also taught entertainment business law and finance to MBA students in UCLA and at UC Irvine. After leaving Village Roadshow, he was a full-time film professor and law professor, he is currently a practicing lawyer. And yes. And we were having a great debate on AI right now. That's not ended yet, so we're going to continue. And then, of course, we have Anjum Rajbali, who we generally thought had decided to leave, but I'm so glad he's here. I think the Indian film industry doesn't need to be introduced to Mr. Rajbali. He's a veteran screenwriter for the last 33 years with films like Drokal, Gulam, The Legend of Bhagat Singh, Rajniti. He's mentored the scripts of many films, Gangajal, Aparan, etc. In 2004, he founded and ran the screenplay writing course at the Film and Television Institute of India since 2006. He has been the founder head of screenwriting at the Whistling Woods International, Mumbai. He's also the founding chairman of the Screenwriters Association, which is a copyright society for screenwriters. He founded in 2006 the Progressive Writers Group, which has been steering the Screenwriters Association, the trade union of writers since then. So that's our panel. And now our topic is the role of intellectual property and copyright for audiovisual performers and content creators, which is just the topic you want after lunch. And I was thinking about this topic, and I came across something that I've, as a copyright lawyer, come across again and again. In 1841, there was a proposal in the House of Commons in the UK to extend the term of copyright to 60 years. And Thomas Babington Macaulay stood up to oppose this suggestion or this bill. And I want to read out what he said. He said, I will only say this, that if the measure before us should pass, there will soon be a remedy, though of a very objectionable kind. Just as the absurd acts which prohibited the sale of game were virtually repealed by the poacher, just as many absurd revenue acts have been virtually repealed by the smuggler, so will this law be virtually repealed by piratical booksellers. At present, the holder of copyright has the public feeling on his side. Pass this law, and that feeling is at an end. Men are very different from the present race of piratical booksellers, will soon infringe this intolerable monopoly. great masses of capital will be constantly employed in the violation of the law. Every art will be employed to evade legal pursuit, and the whole nation will be in the plot. The bill was defeated 45 votes to 38 votes. And I'm, however, happy to say that copyright and IP have persevered since 1841. I would say rather it's been strengthened. We've learned to work with each other's perception of intellectual property. We've worked at harmonizing intellectual property. We've worked on reciprocally recognizing or respecting each other's intellectual property, depending on the species of the right. India is a part of the international mainstream, the Berne Convention, the WPPT, WCT, you name it. India has actually outstripped a lot of the world in recognizing the imperative, or rather the single imperative, that unless creators and performers, singers, actors and creators, lyricists, composers, screenplay writers are not recognized and respected, our copyright system is not going to be what it should be or could be. And this, it's not only the word respect, it is the securing and guaranteeing of the right of monetization. So, our sector has grown to what I think FICCI's own report in terms of the audiovisual sector assessed at somewhere around $7 billion, $7.2 billion this year. It's not as if we don't have challenges. There's challenges of compliance, there's challenges of new technology and disruption. I often humorously compare artificial intelligence to the Oppenheimer quote when they detonated the first atomic device, and he took that line from the Bhagavad Gita. He says, "Now I'm become death, the destroyer of worlds." Perhaps a bit over the top, but at the same time, you get a sense of what one part of the world feels. These challenges, there's a trend today of bilateral trade agreements, and the question is what that does to our multilateral safety in terms of reciprocity and recognition. Digital services where content becomes data, artificial intelligence where data becomes token. And so what happens to creativity and the creative works? The upsides are technology leverages content creators, it leverages content dissemination, it reduces cost input in content creation, it democratizes IP ownership and IP dissemination. So there are a lot of questions I have, but I think by now we might have a limited panel. What I want to start off with is Mr. Tang, Mr. Darren Tang. You spoke about WIPO's creative economy data model. And when I look at policy making, etc., I think data-driven policy making is something that is super important. How can that help member countries who opt for that model?
Thank you so much, Amit, and very happy to hear that you're involved in the 2012 amendments to the Copyright Act, and I'm just pleased to be here. I think you started with this debate, 1841, what's the correct or what's the appropriate term of protection for copyright? I wish the parliamentarians then had access to data, because you had sentiments this side, that side, and I think it's always dangerous to rely entirely on sentiments. I don't think sentiments are wrong, but to rely entirely on sentiments is not the most complete way of making policy. So I think that combining, of course, the considerations of humanity, spirituality almost, which I think India has always had that approach, and that's why I mentioned in the speech, India has not lost its soul in the process of pursuing innovation growth. Alongside that, if we can have the economic perspective, that is useful. Again, I'm not saying that the economic perspective should be the only perspective. You need to balance that. You need a multifaceted approach. But I think the economic perspective can be very valuable in understanding the impact and allowing policymakers to design the right policies in a very precise way. Now, the problem we have right now is that the way we understand economics in the world right now is geared towards the post-World War II industrial complex. And so it's not just in the area of the creative economy, but generally in what I call the intangible asset economy. We don't know how to value it. We don't know how to understand its relationship with trade, with commerce, with finance, and all of that. And in fact, if you look at India, your unicorns and your startups, and even your Tatas and your Reliance and all your big companies, as you're pursuing research, innovation, creativity as models of growth, your asset creation is shifting from tangible assets to intangible assets, ideas, IP, know-how, data, and all of that. So we now need to better understand the innovation economy, and the subset of that is how do we understand the creative economy. And so what WIPO is doing is that we are helping member states to, and we piloted this project in Philippines, I think in 1 or 2 Central Asian countries, and in Latin America and Chile, where we're helping these member states, the policymakers and the economists, as well as the creators, right, to find better metrics to measure the value of the creative economy. Now, if you look at traditionally how a Ministry of Culture values the creative economy, they look at things like software exports, they look at things like number of films, number of content, and this sort of things, right? Not saying that's wrong, but I think that's not capturing the right picture now. GDP contribution of Indian creative economy is 0.75%. It doesn't sound right to me. It doesn't sound right to me. When I spoke about this to some of your political leaders, they say, it doesn't sound right to us. But what's the value? Is it 8%? Is it 5%? Is it? So I think this is where I really want to help member states, and we are embarking on this journey to work with all of the experts, right, to really find better metrics to measure the economy. I want to bring this project to India as well. When we met with Niti Aayog, we pitched to Vice Chairman, let's do this project, and I think, I hope that India can be one of our pilots as well on this one. Yeah.
I'm hopeful that our front row being occupied by members of the DPI take note of the possibility of this sort of data assessment. Firozji, we're talking about policy and stuff. I want to ask you from a perspective of a film director, screenplay writer, क्या रिश्ता है आपका intellectual property से? What is your relationship with intellectual property? एक वो सवाल हुआ. दूसरा ये concept आपके लिए यही matter करता है कि when somebody is buying your IP, क्योंकि आपको लगता है कि आपकी recognition नहीं है IP में, or you can't monetize your IP yourself. So what is your relationship with intellectual property as a creator?
First, let me tell you that Mahatma Gandhi had said that speak only if you can improve upon the silence. So, if I can improve upon the silence, I will try and speak. So, certainly, we've heard a lot of these things. I was first wondering why I was here. But now, after hearing both of you, I realize that I should have been here. I should have been here because for me, IP, you heard about monetization, about money and so on and so forth. People think IP means that I will monetize and I'll get all my money. But for me, it's fundamentally a human rights issue. It's a human rights issue. A society, our relationship with IP has been need-based, not rights-based. We have a transaction. Somebody is in need of money and the money is given and all rights are taken away from them. We take pride. It's a society that is so obsessed with exploitation, is that somebody who comes in a society when it says that I got a desperate painter selling his very expensive painting because he's in need and I got it very cheap, and you celebrate exploitation, that is the problem. First, it's the mindset. Do I respect my artist? Because you will understand one thing, that the creative life of an artist is for a very short time. Thereafter, it needs to be given by the intellectual property it creates. It needs to, so this is not about just monetizing an IP, it's about dignity. So unless a society first thinks it respects its artist, because if it respects exploitation, if you take great pride that at the end of the life, or the last stages of the life, an artist is begging for medical attention and people are not able to give, wherein his best time of his work has been given to somebody who's building a whole empire. There are empires that are made. Valuations are being given. What are these valuations that you have with a lot of film companies? Those valuations have come from the intellectual property of the artists. So for me, That to me is very important. The rest of the thing of implementing our rights and all that will all come. There are very big lawyers, and the lawyers and all that come in place very well. They take your cuts and all that. They will come. But this is surely a question of dignity, about accepting. It's a society that needs to understand that it cannot take pride in exploitation. It should take pride in celebrating the artist and giving them the due. There needs to be a fair transaction. And unless you change that mindset, the rest of them are details.
Very well said, Firozi. The only little bit of correction that I want to do is, I don't think the Mahatma had lawyers in mind when he said that, because being a lawyer himself, he knew better.
He was a lawyer himself, but he used to keep silent for one day, and I think he was very, very economical with his words.
Anjum, you have plowed and furrowed and built that lonely road to a screenwriters copyright society. And again, I think I'm going to sound a little trite asking this question, but again, I'll ask the same question. What has IP meant to you? I want to add another question to it. Foe, ambivalent friend, or zero? What does IP mean for you as a screenplay writer now? Having done what you've achieved from the Screenplay Writers Association, the Copyright Society.
It's a good thing that you specified by saying now, okay? Because I'm going to first strike a slightly discordant note here. At a philosophical level, okay, I do believe that art should be free. It should not have borders. It should travel. We have been enriched by the kind of ancient narratives and the epics and the folk tales that we have, which are freely moving around. If there was a certain restriction there, it may not have sort of reached us. The problem is that we do need to have these copyright restrictions. We do need to agitate against what Macaulay said. And I completely agree with what, of course, Firoz is saying and what you've said and what Darren said. We do need to have, after the death of the author, 60 years where the copyright remains, royalties should be paid, and it became a non-assignable right. And all that is very, very valid, given the kind of economic structure that we do have, which actually agitates against my personal philosophy. I'm going to strike an even more discordant note, and at the risk of being lynched. Piracy, okay? Now, in India, a lot of the world cinema films, Kurosawa's films, Fellini's films, etc., which were so enriching for us as budding filmmakers and writers, would not be available through the legal channels. It was not possible. Okay. We learned about that, we feasted on that, we were educated by that, actually because of piracy. Okay, because pirates sort of copied it from there and they came and sold it here cheap and we managed to see it there. So we owe a lot, frankly speaking, particularly at that stage, those years when I had just begun writing, I'm talking about 90s and early 2000, through that. Because there were no legal channels. Why? Because people were looking at whether it is viable, whether it's profitable, and because the economy actually prevents you from accessing art, which is enriching for society, which is educative for society. Hence, then piracy comes into the picture. Now, yes, of course, there is a perverse side to it where piracy also has become a business and it hurts. And I completely understand the need for controls, particularly now since access is far more easy with digitalization, etc. So yes, but I'm talking about then that in fact, privately we would say, God bless piracy, that it's available to us. You see, Darren, sorry to say this. Okay, as far as what it has meant to us, I think I can only elaborate in a more specific way what Firoz has been saying, that it is a society where it's not just need-based, but that need is exploited to exercise power. Why is it that writers and singers and performers and lyricists and composers have been denied their rights by these people? Because they could. Now, as far as the struggle is concerned, let me strike again a slightly unhappy note here, that the law got amended. Okay, Javed Akhtar also led the whole fight. You were admirably there. I mean, you were behind the scenes, but I do know that the stellar contribution of Amit, you know, because he would formulate it, he would devise the strategy, he would feed it into that. And Javed sir, by all means, fought fearlessly. We, on the other hand, the Screenwriters Association, were fighting for the screenwriters, whereas there it was going on for lyricists and composers. So fortunately, the act got changed. But then came the whole implementation thing. Firstly, of course, the Copyright Society has to be registered, and, you know, Karan is sitting here. I think even Deepak is here, others are here. They knew the kind of struggles that we had to go through because there were various sort of obstacles which had to be bypassed. So it took, from the time that we put in our application to the time that we got our registration, it was 8 years and 8 months it took, okay, to get the whole thing through. Now is the challenge, Amit, of making sure that what the Copyright Society is meant to do in terms of implementing the law, that it can happen. And yet there is resistance. Yet the larger corporations, etc., and you know that that's happening with IPRS already, where there are large broadcasting corporations which are saying that we will not pay. And it's gone to court, and endless fights are going on, in spite of the fact that the law has been changed, and the intention of the law is absolutely transparently and abundantly clear, Darren, that this is meant to ensure that the copyright of artists and performers and, you know, writers are protected, and that they should receive the due royalty. Yet there is resistance to that, and there's a cumbersome process which is going on. So it has been an endless fight. It is still going on, and we are expecting support from also people like you, where perhaps you can exercise influence to ensure that we get some support. The only way out here, frankly, is collective bargaining, which is why it was important that the union also presents a united front for the writers and fights. But of course, there is resistance here. Okay. But we're trying that, but some amount of support, some amount of intervention from people like you, from WIPO, okay, on perhaps the government, so that there can be some message sent out to those people, to the corporations, that you have to follow the law. And the law's intention is very clearly to make sure that these rights are granted. So go right ahead and don't resist it. Anyway, we're still fighting the lone battle with or without, you know, this kind of support. So that is what it has meant. I mean, it is, we do feel cheated. We do feel exploited. We do feel vulnerable. Okay, we do feel that our human rights, as Firoz eloquently said, are being violated. But today is not, I cannot go with what Firoz is saying, that the mindset should change, because this should doesn't seem to operate. No one is interested in that. I cannot, you know, prevail upon morality and tell them that this is wrong. There's no such thing. I mean, this is the corporate sector. What is right and wrong is the balance sheet, is the bottom line. So why do they do it? Because they can. So they have to be stopped from doing it. That's the only way forward to do it. And that is what we are aiming to do. And it's going to still be a bit of a long haul, but of course, we're expecting government, we're expecting, you know, WIPO to perhaps help us, and we intend to continue to appeal to you people.
Thanks, Anjum. Steve, you're looking at this from a US perspective, and you looked at all those collective bargaining agreements, and you've seen the development. One of the things I've often wondered is why they didn't have collective bargaining agreements in India. You know, one of my personal sort of theories was that, you know, content, films and music, copyright started getting monetized when the mechanical contrivance started in India. There was no publishing, because in music, for instance, was oral. There's no graphical notation of music, for instance. So there was no publishing business. So the Victor Hugos of Europe were not motivated in India because it wasn't a business. There were no song sheets being sold, which were then interdicted by the wax roll or the cylindrical roll and then the gramophone. And so that's perhaps one of the reasons why collectivization of the creative community never happened in India. Studios came, music companies came, and that's where music and film became a business. So you're looking at perhaps that part of parallel with US sort of copyright history, where India is where the US has sort of gone past. Based on your experience, and the great thing is you've been in the business and you're a master of the law, when it comes to the interests of creators, producers, and distributors, what is your advice to India in terms of do's and don'ts, in terms of intellectual property?
So I guess I would start by saying, for the copyright experts, this is well understood, but perhaps not as much for creators. The first thing I would focus on simply is that people don't always appreciate how much all of the rights protected by copyright law can be carved up, sliced and diced, right? It's not binary that you simply give away all of your rights under copyright or you keep them all. You can license film rights, but not episodic series rights. You can license film and episodic series rights, but only in a certain language. And of course, you can also carve things up geographically. You can grant rights to create something in India and then distribute it around the world, but not to create something in the English language in the United States and distribute that all around the world. And then of course, time period has also been alluded to, but I won't focus so much on that. And I think that has created a lot of opportunities. In terms of what our two artists up here have said, copyright isn't just about money, as they well understand. It's also about control. And part of that dignity of the artist is the ability to control how their work is exploited, quite aside from how they're compensated. Those are often highly related, but they are two different things. And so whether you're keeping certain rights under copyright simply to maintain control, or also to earn more money for what you create, there are enormous opportunities. I think the default, as has been said, is large media companies or producers, the default is acquire everything. But often, acquirers, licensors, or licensees rather, are not in a position to exploit everything. And so there are opportunities to retain certain rights and then to control them and exploit them elsewhere. In the US, there are more opportunities than ever for language, content from other parts of the world to be exploited in the United States. I'm old enough to remember this thing called television, where you just turned on your television and watched what was on and there were ads. That now has an acronym, FAST, free advertising supported television. That just was television. But now FAST platforms are acquiring a huge amount of content from other countries and in languages other than English, and making it available in the United States. The ability for your works to be remade in English and in other countries are greater than they've ever been, in part because of the streamers and their localization efforts to take films made in one part of the world and make them, again, artistically, maybe not always the most wonderful thing, but there are opportunities there. So I would say, try to retain the rights that matter most to you, and also, again, the rights that the person on the other side of the table really can't exploit. And again, the default is take it all, but if they're really not in a position to exploit it, keep it, control it, and do something else with it yourself.
Thanks. I don't think a panel on IP can now be completed, and I'm loath to kind of pull it up, but without artificial intelligence. And I want to start with the two creators. Again, Ferozi, please let yourself go and tell me about what you think about artificial intelligence.
That doesn't seem to be a problem. He seems very comfortable letting himself go.
Yeah. And what is it? I mean,
Well, artificial intelligence has to be understood from understanding the theory of Darwin. It's a survival of the fittest. You'd be very surprised, and I was just talking to Anjum, is that you give the artificial intelligence some things, and when it comes back to you, some of the most stunning piece of poetry I have read in recent times that's coming from there. Script, story ideas are coming to it. But the question is that the artificial intelligence is actually scavenging on the work already created. So how are we going to deal with that? Because simply speaking, artificial intelligence is Darwinism, survival of the fittest. And the human intelligence has created a kind of a competitor for its own self, right? So in that sense, how are we going to, so artificial intelligence is about regulation, and artificial intelligence is fed all the material that, well, they have the whole world library now, and they have got the whole world from which to create, and they can take pieces from here and there. So in fact, it's more of a problem of how the legal framework is going to deal with that, and it's something that I suppose the lawyers may be able to answer that question, because that's going to be a huge opportunity for all the lawyers to deal with this situation. So I would leave it to the lawyers.
See, I told you so. Lawyers are critical to this issue. Mr. Tang, is it a question of one over the other, AI and IP, or is there a balance achievable, you think, which supports innovation and rewards creators?
This is the hottest topic in copyright right now. How do we deal with Gen AI in all, first of all, taking copyrighted content, training on it without permission, and then generating works, and how do we address all of that? Now, my view is that AI is a tool, first of all, and we have to be very careful when people claim that it's an elevated to become and deify it. We're seeing some tendencies among certain big companies, big corporations, to echo what Anjum is saying, to deify their products. And I think that's a very, very dangerous thing to do. I think AI can be a useful tool. It can create something very surprising. But for me, AI should never undermine, destroy the human creator. It should be there to empower, enable the human creator. So to me, the fundamental thing is that IP system must continue putting the human creator right at the center, and the same for the human innovator as well. Because for me as a musician, I mean, I'm not professional like some of you, many of you in this room, but I used to be a very serious musician. And listening to and understanding AI, both in my capacity as you know, someone seeing the latest trends, as well as someone who knows the creative side, AI is a very, very skillful replicator. But AI doesn't have the spark of creativity to really make the leap that is part of genuine human creativity. AI is never going to be able to, for example, learn the disco catalog of the 1970s, and from there move into new wave music, which is the music I grew up with in the 1980s. You know, you can't move from ABBA to Depeche Mode. It's not possible.